It was 3 months after Sarah had died. Rose and Mike were having breakfast on the dining table when Mike started. "I want a divorce," Mike said suddenly. "Mike, what did you say?" Rose said, doubting her ears. "I said I want a divorce. This marriage isn't working, obviously. Let's just go our separate ways. At least we don't have any children that will come in between us," Mike said. Rose was too shocked to talk. She stared at Mike in surprise. "What is this one saying this early morning?" she asked herself. "I'm serious. I want you to start parking your thing," Mike said. Rose still didn't understand what he was saying. "But what did I do? Where did I go wrong? Please tell me." "I didn't say you did anything, but this marriage isn't heading anywhere. It's better we go our separate ways," Mike said again. "You just wake up one morning and want a divorce like that? Is it because you're a man and you can move on easily?" "Do you know how hard it will be for me to survive?" Rose ranted. "I'm sure you were surviving fine before you met me," Mike said nonchalantly. "Mike, you're devil," Rose said with so much disgust. It's barely 3 months we lost our daughter and now you want a divorce? Mike, who are you? You've literally ruined my life," Rose said, already crying. "It's just a divorce, it's not the end of life. I'm very sure you'll pick up very soon. So I'm already late for work. I don't want to see you here when I'm back. At least you have a place to stay. You think I didn't know about the numerous times you went to visit your mother? You think I don't know that you use my cars whenever you want to go and meet your numerous boyfriends? Oh, tell me, or do you want to deny it? Please don't try to make me the devil here," Mike said and walked out. Rose couldn't believe her ears. She just stayed there as tears rolled down her eyes. She told herself that she wasn't going anywhere. This was her house and she wouldn't just leave like that. She waited for Mike to come back from work. He came back and still met her in the house. "I thought I told you to leave," Mike barked immediately he entered into the house. "How can you tell me to leave my matrimonial home and expect me to just leave like that?" Rose retorted. "It's like you don't know the meaning of leave me alone. I don't want you anymore. Please leave," Mike said. Rose didn't budge. She stood her ground. She wasn't leaving that house, she told herself. "Since you don't want to leave by yourself, I think I'll have to force you out," Mike said. Mike went upstairs and packed all her stuff. Then he came downstairs and dragged her with him. He pulled her out of the door and threw her outside the gate with force, then threw wades of Naira notes to her. Then he went back to the house. "I have gotten rid of her," he said as he called her. "So she's no more in the house?" she asked. "Yes, and she won't be coming back," Mike replied. "Yes, so when can we park in? Me and the boys?" "You can come tomorrow," Mike replied. "Yay, let me start parking," she said happily. Rose cursed Mike as she picked up her things. She stood up from the ground and took a taxi to her mother's house. She reached the house and knocked on the door. "My daughter, what happened? Why are you crying? Come inside and sit and tell you're clutching your belongings like this," Rose's mother said immediately she opened the door for her. "Mummy, it's a very long story. Please allow me to go inside and rest a little bit," Rose said with tired and bulgy eyes. "Okay, my daughter, go upstairs. There's a spare room there. You can stay there for now," Mrs. Alade said. Rose went upstairs. Her mother helped her take her things to the spare room upstairs. "Luckily for you, I cleaned up the room this morning, so it's fine," Mrs. Alade said. "Mummy, thank you. I'll rest now," Rose said as she laid on the bed. "I'll be on my way," Mrs. Alade said as she left and closed the door to the room. When she was outside the door, she stood on the corridor. "What will it be this time?" she thought. "I hope she's fine," she said, as she shook her head and walked downstairs to continue what she'd doing. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Rose was inside the room. She couldn't sleep. She was forcing herself not to think about Mike, but it was not working. She continued wondering how Mike would do something like that. It was unbelievable, though he wasn't a good husband. She thought he still had that soft spot somewhere, but she was totally wrong. She lost her daughter, and now it was her husband. It was a Saturday. 1 week after Rose was chased out of her matrimonial home. She was lying down on the bed in her room in her mother's house, same way she has been for the whole week since she arrived. She was in there brooding and being sad. She refused to come out the whole week. Her mother would bring food to her and leave her there. When her mother came back to fetch the plates, she would notice that she only ate very little. She refused to speak with anyone. Her phone had been switched off since she arrived, so she hadn't spoken to her friends, and she wasn't planning on doing that anytime soon because she wasn't ready to talk to them yet. "Wakey, wakey, up, up, sleepy bag," her mother said as she entered the room. "Mum, good morning," she said as she rolled on the bed to face her mother. "How was your night?" "It was okay," Rose replied. "Just so you know, you're standing up from this bed today," Mrs. Alade said. "No, I don't want to," Rose replied, almost sobbing. "I choose not to hear that. If I let you stay one more day on this bed, you'll fall into depression. How can you stay in one place for 1 week? Just taking your bath and eating, you have not even said a word to me about what happened. Whatever it is that happened does not give you the warranty to do this to yourself. It's not the end of the world. Come on, stand up from there. We're going to the grocery store today to buy foodstuff. You have to let out this sadness in you. But before that, we're going downstairs to make breakfast." "Okay, Mom, just be going, I'm behind you," Rose said. "No, you're not doing that again. Stand up. We're going together," Mrs. Alade said, as she pulled her up. As they made breakfast, Mrs. Alade asked Rose once more about what had happened. Rose decided to let everything out. She told her how Mike threw her out of the house and everything. "We're going back there, he can't do this to you," Mrs. Alade said angrily when Rose finished her story. "No, Mum. Let's just leave it to God. Moreover, you can't force something on someone. I won't be happy myself," Rose replied. "But it's not fair," Mrs. Alade said. "The world is not a fair place," Rose said, laughing dryly. They finished making the breakfast and set the table. "Ruby, Ruby, come downstairs and take your breakfast," Mrs. Alade called. "Mummy, I'm coming down." They finished eating breakfast. Rose and Mrs. Alade did the normal Saturday cleanup before they went upstairs to rest. When it was early afternoon, the landline telephone began to ring. Mrs. Alade answered the phone. It was one of her assistants at the hospital where she worked. "Ma'am, you're needed in the hospital as fast as possible. There is an emergency," the assistant said. "But I'm working night shift today," Mrs. Alade countered. "Ma'am, it's an emergency, please." "Okay, I'll be there very soon," Mrs. Alade said. She sighed as she put back the phone. She went upstairs to tell Rose. "Rose, something happened, so I won't be able to follow you to the grocery store. You have to go alone," Mrs. Alade said as she opened the door to Rose's room. "Yes, Mum, there's no problem," Rose said. "Thank you, ooh. You'll see my credit card on top of my side bed cupboard. That's what you'll use to pay for the things you'll buy. You'll find the keys to the other car there too, so transport won't be your problem." "Mum, there's no problem. I'll do just that." "That reminds me, I think you should be using that car for now too," Mrs. Alade said. "Mum, thank you," Rose replied. Mrs. Alade left the room in contentment. When Mrs. Alade left the house, Rose stood up and dressed up to go to the grocery store. Before leaving, she went to Ruby's room to make sure that she'll be okay alone in the house. "Yes, Aunt, I'll be fine." Rose nodded before leaving the house. She locked the doors before leaving. At the store, Rose took out her time to pick out the best items. When she was through, she went to the counter with the shopping cart to pay for what she bought. That was when she realized that she forgot the credit card at home. She was dumbfounded. She didn't have enough cash with her to pay for the stuff. She just looked at the attendant without knowing what to do. "Sum everything up and pay with my card," a man said, as he put what he bought together with Rose's own. Rose turned to look at who said that. She had never seen that face before. He looked mature. He was tall and dark. He looked like he was in his mid-40s, Rose thought. She wondered who was still as kind as this in these times. When the attendant had finished everything, she told the strange man thank you as she took her bags to leave. "Hey, wait," he said as he rushed to meet up with her. Can I at least know your name? He said. My name is Rose, she replied. Okay, Rose, I'm Victor. Okay. By that time, they had reached her car already. Can I have your number, please? Victor said. Rose looked at him and smiled dryly. Is this how all you men behave? Can't you help someone out without wanting something in return? Rose said rudely. No, I just want to know you better, Victor said, defending himself. Rose didn't talk anymore as she put her bags in the car and drove off. Men are all the same, she thought to herself as she drove. Rose, you need to get a job, Mrs. Alade said to Rose as they made dinner. Yes, Mum, I thought about it. I know your husband didn't allow you to work, but your certificate can't just go to waste like that. I know you've never made use of your certificate since you left school. Am I wrong? Mrs. Alade asked. Mum, it's very true. I'll go and look for it later. It should be in one of my boxes, Rose replied. I'll refer you to firms, so get everything ready. Yes, Mum. After dinner, Rose went upstairs and started looking for the certificate. She searched everywhere, but she couldn't find it. That was when she realized that she wasn't the one that packed her bags. Mike had packed all her things and brought them downstairs before he chased her out. She remembered that she kept her certificate in the last section of their closet. Mum, I would be going back to Mike's house tomorrow. My certificate is still there, and some other things I possess should probably be there too, Rose told her mum. Do you need help, or can you go alone? I think I'll need a little help, Rose said. There's no problem. We'll go tomorrow, Mrs. Alade said. They reached Mike's house. Mrs. Alade was driving. She stopped in front of the house. Mrs. Alade remained in the car while Rose went and knocked on the gate. The gateman answered it. Madam Nayu. Namiu, how you day? Madam I dayu. Oya open the gate na. I want enter collect something way I forget. But madam, the gateman started to stammer. Weddin happen? Rose asked. Oga talk say make I no open gate for you anytime way you come back. Which can order be dat? Comet for this gate make I enter, Rose said as she pushed the gateman out of the way and entered into the house. Surprisingly, the door wasn't locked. She entered and went to the room she shared with Mike. She saw a woman lying down on their bed face down. The figure seemed very familiar. She moved closer and touched the person sleeping. She woke up startled. Rose was very shocked. What are you doing here? Did you come to look for me and you didn't find me? Then you came to sleep on my matrimonial bed? Rose asked, surprise echoing in her voice. Rose, this is my home now, Lola replied. What do you mean, this is your home now? Rose asked, still confused. I said that I have taken over from you. Mike is now my husband and I have 2 sons for him. At least I gave him what you couldn't, Lola said. So you're the one behind everything, behind Amy, behind my daughter's death, Rose asked. Lola didn't reply. Lola, what did I ever do to you? I have been nothing but a good friend to you. What did I do to deserve this? Lola didn't say anything. Rose went closer to her quietly. When she reached her front, she gave her a very dirty slap. She started to beat her. She was crying and was beating her. She couldn't get her head straight. Everything was still strange to her. That was when Mike entered the room. The gateman informed him that Rose was in the house. He entered and met Rose beating Lola. He dragged Rose out and threw her out. Mike, you're a wicked man. I can't believe you did this to me with my own best friend. Mike, God will punish you. It will not be well with you. Rose continued to cuss at him as she was being dragged out. He threw her out and banged the gate lock in her face. I thought I told you that I never want to see her in this house. What's wrong with you? You can't even listen to simple instructions. The next time this happens, you'll be sacked. Mike warned the gateman angrily. Oga sorry, Now she forced herself enter. What happened? I knew when Mike entered into the house, there would be disaster. Were you able to collect the certificate? Mrs. Alade asked Rose as she entered into the car. Mum, you won't believe what happened, Rose said, crying. What happened? Her mother asked inquisitively. My own best friend betrayed me. How? Rose explained to her mother all that transpired in the house. Mrs. Alade was shocked too. These days you won't know who to trust anymore, Mrs. Alade said. Rose continued crying till they reached home. The next day she switched on her phone and called Tony. "Hello? Rose, what happened? I've been trying your line since last week, but it wasn't going. I even went to your house, but the gateman refused to let me in. Is anything wrong?" "Tony, it's a long story. Let's meet for coffee, I'll tell you everything," Rose replied. "I'll be free by 2. Come to that coffee shop near my workplace." "No problem, you'll see me there," Rose said as she put down the phone. Rose was on her way to meet Tony. She wasn't in her right mind. What happened the previous day was still hovering over her. There was subtle traffic congestion. When it was time for them to move, she moved faster than expected and hit the car in front of her. The car stopped. She didn't know what to do. She didn't have strength to start arguing with some stranger. She didn't know if she had enough money to pay off the person. She came down from her car. There was no visible damage on her car. It was the other car that had scratches on it. The owner of the car also came down. When she saw him, she looked at him in shock. It was Victor, the guy that she met at the grocery store. She didn't know how to talk to him because she was rude to him the last time. "Hey, I'm sorry for your car," Rose said, her eyes drooping. "There's no problem at all. I guess it's fate that made us meet once more, and I hope you would be nicer this time." Rose just looked at him without saying anything. "It seems you were heading somewhere before this happened," he said, gesticulating. Rose nodded. "I would like to meet you some other time if it would be fine with you." Rose still didn't talk. "Your number, please?" he said. Rose handed her phone to him. He input his number and dialed himself. Then her number flashed on his phone. "Thank you very much. I guess we would be seeing each other more often," he said as he got into his car. Rose stood there till he got into his car and drove off. Then she got into her own car and went on to meet Tony. When she reached the coffee shop they were meant to meet, Tony was there already waiting for her. "I'm sorry for wasting your time," Rose said as she sat down. "There's no problem, I just got here too," Tony said. "So what is on board?" Tony continued. Rose's face became gloomy. She told Tony everything that happened from the beginning to the end. "Lola, I can't believe this, it's sounding so unbelievable. Now that I know, she seems more distant, like we never really knew her. She never allowed us to come to her house. How did she hide it from us? 2 sons? That's too much. So Lola is a murderer. I knew it. All these quiet people, you can't trust them because you won't even know what they're capable of," Tony said after Rose finished telling her story. "Rose, you must take this matter to the police," Tony said. "There's no proof that she killed anyone. There's nothing we can do. I have a plan. We can make her say the things she did. We'll record it, then it can serve as our proof," Tony replied. "But I don't think there's any way I can get into that house. Mike has ordered that he doesn't want to see me there again, so I don't think the gateman would even let me in," Rose said. "I'll go, then you'll be at my back. Immediately he opens the gate, you force yourself in," Tony said. "I think that would work," Rose said, nodding her head. It was after a week Victor called Rose. They decided to meet up in an eatery. "I'm sorry, I'm late," Rose said as she sat down. "No, don't worry, it's no problem." They exchanged pleasantries before they started talking. "So, tell me about yourself," Victor asked. "There's really nothing much to know about me." "Okay, I and my husband are separated," Rose said. "You were married?" Victor said as his eyes widened in shock. "Yes, why are you surprised?" "It's just, you look so young. Any issue?" "Yes, a daughter, but she's dead." "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, otherwise I wouldn't have asked," Victor said apologetically. "No, there's no problem, I've gotten over it already. Tell me about yourself too." "Okay, my case is a little different. My wife is dead." "Oh, sorry about that." "There's no problem, just like you, I've gotten over it too," Victor said. "Okay?" "Yes, I have a daughter, she's just 4 years old." And their conversation continued. They got to know each other better, and they met subsequently after that day. Victor asked Rose out. It was very hard to let him in, but she finally accepted. They started dating. She had not gotten over her husband yet, and Victor felt it, but he had to take things that way till she finally got over him. When it was the perfect time for Rose and Tony to carry out their plan, they went over everything they would do. Their plan worked, and they entered into the house. They rung the bell. Lola answered it. "What are you guys doing here?" Lola asked immediately she saw both of them. "Lola, we just came to talk to you, please let us in," Tony said. "What are you talking to me about?" "Open the door first," Tony said. Lola opened the door and let them in. "Lola, why would you do this kind of thing to your friend? We trusted you. So you're the one that ordered Amy to kill Sarah. Why did you do it?" Lola remained silent. "Lola, say something," Tony demanded. All the while, Rose remained quiet. "I met Mike when we became friends. I noticed him the first day I came to this house. To cut the story short, we had an affair and I had a child for him. I had a second child again. Yet Mike refused to leave Rose. What were you expecting me to do? I had to do what I had to do. So I used Amy and she did all the work," Lola said without any atom of remorse in her. "Lola, you're wicked," Tony said. "I already know that. I don't need a reminder." Lola said. "Okay, that's all we wanted to hear. Rose, let's go," Tony said as they stood up to go. When they reached the door, they heard Lola laughing. "May I ask why you're laughing?" Tony inquired. "Looking for this?" Lola said as she held up the voice recorder Tony had brought. "How? How did you get hold of it?" Tony asked, confused. "You think I'm a fool? You come to my house just to talk. How on earth do you expect me to believe that trash?" Lola said, smiling wickedly. "You thought I would spill everything like that when I know that you can use it against me? Heh, you're not serious. Anyways, I took it from your bag as you guys walked in. You want to go and report me to the police, or get a lawyer and use this rubbish as proof? Haha, you guys are jokers." Lola took the recorder and smashed it on the ground. Smashed the remaining to pieces with her foot. Rose had already started crying hysterically. This was her last hope to get justice, and it was gone just like that. "And Rose, be expecting divorce papers soon. I'll soon officially be married to Mike." Tony couldn't believe her eyes. What had just happened? Their plan had failed drastically. Lola ordered them to leave her house. She screamed the gateman's name and told him to chase them out of her house. They felt very embarrassed as they walked out of the house. "What are we going to do now?" Tony asked. "I say we leave everything to God. I'm sure he would bring justice." "God would do something, I'm sure," Rose said, crying. 1 week later, after the incident with Lola, Rose had gone to see Victor. She told him everything that happened. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" he asked. "Yes, I'll be fine." They were still talking when Rose's phone rang. An unknown number on the screen. "Hello, who is this?" Rose said as she picked up the phone. "This is Mike's lawyer. Mike was involved in a ghastly motor accident. The doctors want to perform a surgery. You're needed at the hospital because you're the closest next of kin." Rose was in panic as she took her things, trying to rush out of Victor's house. "Tell me what happened," Victor demanded. "My husband was involved in an accident and he's in the hospital. I need to get there as fast as I can," she said as she rushed out of his house. She still calls him her husband after everything she has been through in his hands, Victor thought. He was sad. Does she really love him at all? Will her love for her husband ever quench? He asked himself. When Rose reached the hospital, Lola was there already arguing with the lawyer. When he sighted Rose, he shifted his attention to her. "Ma'am, your husband is about to undergo surgery. This surgery is a very sensitive one. If he does not do it, his death is sure. But if he undergoes the surgery and it doesn't go well, he will suffer full paralysis. That means he wouldn't be able to move any part of his body. And this surgery has only experienced 50% success. You're still his wife legally, so if you want us to go through with the surgery, you have to sign these papers." "Where are the papers? Let me sign them," Rose said. "I don't think he should go through with this surgery. I'm his wife now. You have to listen to me," Lola ranted. "Are you hearing that the probability of success is 50%? There is still a chance, woman," Rose countered Lola. "If he becomes paralyzed for life, would you be the one to take care of him? He would hate you forever," Lola said. Please bring the papers for me to sign, Rose said, ignoring Lola. Lola walked out of the hospital angrily. Rose stayed in the hospital throughout the surgery. It was successful. She stayed with him after that and took care of him. When he finally woke up, he looked at her. "What are you doing here? Where is my wife? What have you done to her?" Mike shouted. Rose was angry. He had not even realized that she has been there since day one. He was busy asking for his wife. That was when the doctor walked into his room. "Mister, you're discharged. You can go home today." Rose helped him park his things. His legs were still weak, so he had to make use of a wheelchair. She rode him out of the hospital and helped him into her car. When they reached his house, she helped him upstairs. "Now, I'm losing my patience. Where is my wife?" Mike started to shout once more. "How would I know where she went to? The last time I saw her was at the hospital on the day of your surgery. The least you should do right now is to thank me. Your so-called wife wanted you dead. She didn't want the surgery performed on you. For your information, I'm all you've got now. I'm sure your wife is somewhere enjoying herself." Rose laughed. Mike couldn't believe his ears. He pushed himself to the closet and opened it. He didn't see any of Lola's things. He was dumbfounded. How could she do this to him? He checked his mails and saw that almost all his money has been transferred to a strange account on his approval. He was confused. What had he been thinking? He asked himself. Rose took care of him as the weeks passed. He started to see the goodness in her. That was when he realized he still loved her. He could walk by this time. One day, Rose made breakfast. After he finished eating, he made advances towards her. "Rose, come back and live here. Let's be happy. Let's start our marriage anew," Mike said. "Mike, I guess you're well now, so you don't need me anymore. I'll leave today, and one more thing. I'm in love with someone else." Mike ran his hands through his hair. He watched as Rose took her remaining things and walked out of the house, walked out of his life. He started to regret. She really loved him, but he took it for granted. Now he has lost her. He has lost the love of his life. He shed tears. He had nobody, no money, nothing, no wife, no child. His life was just finished. Where would he start from? Lola ran away from everything. She started a new life with the money she stole from Mike. She was driving one day when a trailer ran through her car. She was rushed to the hospital. Her legs were infected already, so in order not to let the infection spread, her 2 legs were amputated. She lost 2 legs. She was now a disabled. She would live her whole life on a wheelchair. She regretted her actions, the sins she had committed against both God and man. She mustered all courage and called Rose to ask for forgiveness. Rose forgave her. Rose had gotten married to Victor. She decided to forget everything about her past life, everything she had experienced, everything about Mike and Lola. She decided to start her life all over again with Victor. They were happy together. She took his daughter as her own. Because of all that, she found it very easy to forgive Lola. God had fought the battle no man could fight for her. At least she had gotten justice. She didn't allow anything to make her unhappy. Her and Victor live happily ever after.